For 40 years, the Israelites wandered the wilderness. The generation that fled Egypt died in the desert, leaving only their children to finish the journey. Moses is dead. The promises God made to Abraham centuries ago, promises of a homeland and a permanent inheritance, now depend on this specific historical moment. Only the Jordan River stands between these people and their future. The water is the final barrier to the land told to be theirs. Leadership has passed to Joshua. He is now responsible for guiding millions across this river and into territory occupied by established, fortified nations. Crossing this water is a requirement. Without this entry, the covenant with Abraham remains an unfulfilled ambition rather than a historical reality. The book of Joshua records ancient military campaigns and catalogs of tribal boundaries. It reads like a collection of Bronze Age war reports and administrative data. This text provides the connection securing the biblical story. It records the transition from the laws of the wilderness to the reality of the promised land. If the story ended with the death of Moses, the promises of Genesis would remain unfinished. Joshua provides the evidence that God does what he says he will do. These events provide the framework for understanding the work of Jesus Christ. The way Joshua leads his people into their inheritance mirrors how Christ leads believers into theirs. By analyzing the architecture of this text and the rules governing the conquest, we can see how this ancient land claim provides a map for the Christian gospel. The author organizes these 24 chapters into a 4-part argument for God's faithfulness. The first 2 phases cover the crossing and the taking of the land. Miraculous events, like the fall of Jericho, show that these victories were the result of divine intervention rather than human military expertise. The third phase focuses on dividing the land. These detailed lists of territories function as royal land grants, where the sovereign king officially bestows an inheritance upon his people. The final phase centers on service. Joshua calls for the people to maintain their loyalty to the covenant now that they are living within their new borders. This structure builds toward the summary in chapter 21. It declares that not one of the good promises the Lord made to Israel had failed. Every word came to pass. The land was never a prize seized by Israel's strength. It was a gift delivered by a God who keeps his word. The archaeological record shows the scale of the challenge Joshua faced. Canaanite cities were built behind massive retaining walls and deep fortifications. The text also presents a difficult moral reality, the command to destroy the inhabitants of this land. The conquest was an act of divine moral judgment. It followed centuries of extreme corruption that God had monitored until it reached its full measure. This judgment targeted practices that the text calls abominable, including the widespread ritual sacrifice of children. These battles were limited to the land of Canaan and restricted to this specific historical period. They were never intended to be a perpetual command for warfare. God's impartial justice was executed against local wickedness, with human beings serving as the instruments of that specific judgment. The book demonstrates that this judgment was based on allegiance to God, not on ethnicity. 2 contrasting case studies make this clear: Rahab and Achan. Rahab was a Canaanite woman living in Jericho. As a member of an enemy nation, she was the ultimate outsider. Because she chose to trust in Israel's God, she and her family were saved from the city's destruction and integrated into the community of Israel. Achan was a privileged Israelite. He had the right pedigree and full standing within the covenant nation. Yet Achan rebelled by stealing items devoted to God from Jericho. His disobedience led to his destruction, regardless of his ethnic background. These stories establish the rule for God's kingdom. Status is determined by personal faith and obedience, which overrules ethnic heritage or institutional privilege. These historical events serve as a pattern for a greater reality that would emerge centuries later. The physical conquest provides the framework for understanding the mission of Jesus Christ. The names Joshua and Jesus are the same in Hebrew, both meaning the Lord saves. Joshua fought earthly battles to secure a physical homeland. This mirrors the work of Jesus, who defeats the spiritual powers of sin and death. While Joshua provided a temporary rest within a specific geography, Jesus provides an eternal spiritual rest for his people. Even after the major battles were won, significant parts of the land remained in Canaanite hands. The Israelites had won the war, but they still had to fight to occupy their specific territories. This parallels the Christian life of sanctification. While Christ has won the definitive victory over sin, believers must still engage in a lifelong battle to remove remaining sin from their lives. Every physical victory and land allotment under Joshua was designed to foreshadow the ultimate salvation secured by Jesus. This history concludes at Shechem, where Joshua gathered the nation one last time to deliver a final address. Joshua's leadership was defined by his reliance on God's presence rather than his own military capability. His life proves that God's faithfulness is a certainty, even when the fulfillment of a promise takes centuries of waiting and wandering. But receiving the gifts of God carries a responsibility. The grace shown to Israel required a response of faithful obedience. The earthly rest Joshua provided points forward to the new creation, where God will dwell with his people in a final, perfect inheritance. Joshua ended his life by asking the people a single question. It is the same question posed to every reader today. Choose this day whom you will serve.